What's up, everybody? Welcome to the first official Rising Action YouTube video. We're going to start off strong with my Game of the Year list 2017 in the middle of February. Yeah. Anyway, 2017 has easily become one of the best years in pop culture memory, which I'm sure most of you watching this video know that already. But if you look at all the movies that came out, the TV shows, and the video games, of course, it's just been an amazing year. Yeah, there's certain aspects of 2017 that haven't been so amazing, especially as far as politics and sexual harassment go. But hey, pop culture was great, right? So we have that to look forward to at least. Especially game-wise. Game-wise, the software this year was phenomenal. Probably the best since 2007, where if you don't know what I mean by that, just Google game releases of 2007 and just be mind blown by how many fantastic games came out that year. But 2017, we had old franchises like Mario and Zelda bring in new titles that, to a lot of people, were the best entries in these franchises. The indie market continued to thrive. New industry auteurs like Dan Salvato appeared this year. And then major developers such as Guerrilla Games and Ninja Theory released new IPs that took the world by storm, and several of those games are on this list as well. So the way I'm going to be doing my Game of the Year list is I have my top 5, of course, with the one that gets the worldwide distinction of the Rising Action Game of the Year award. But since 2017 was so jam-packed, I feel that a top 5 wasn't really enough to portray the spread of games this year, so I also have 5 honorable mentions as well. And to be fair, there are a lot of games this year I wish I could have played that would probably be on this list if I got the chance to, that I just did not have time for, including Wolfenstein 2, Assassin's Creed Origins, Resident Evil 7, Biohazard, Cuphead, PlayerUnknown's Battleground, Uncharted Lost Legacy, Divinity Original Sin 2, What Remains of Edith Finch, Injustice 2. I could keep going on, guys. It's just 2017. What can I say? It's an absolutely crazy year. And those games I listed, I intend to play all of them. It just, with all the games on this list and then other aspects of my life getting in the way, it's been really difficult to get through all of them. But anyway, without further ado, let's get on to the honorable mentions. To say too much about Dan Salvato's debut visual novel, Doki Doki Literature Club, is to rob players like you of a pretty unique experience. Those who wander onto the game's Steam page, they may seem confused when they see that it's labeled as a psychological horror game. They might think that classification, it had to have been a mistake. I mean, look at all the cutesy anime girls and the bubblegum lettering. When the game, at its outset, warns that it's unsuitable for children or those who are easily disturbed, this confusion is only furthered. An omen lingers over this game the whole time you play through it. Throughout this cliche high school dating sim, which is accompanied by this cheesy yet insanely infectious main theme song, something always seems a little bit off. And through clever mechanics and an emotionally moving story, Doki Doki Literature Club brings the medium of gaming itself into question. This game is free to play, so there's no excuse for you to not at least check it out. It only comprises about 5 or so hours of gameplay, which makes this a pretty short but pretty incomparable experience that really has to be seen to be believed. I will warn you, however, that when the game warns you about it being unsuitable for those who are easily disturbed, these warnings are absolutely not to be taken lightly. With Resident Evil 4 being one of my favorite games of all time, The Evil Within obviously was instantly on my radar when it was released back in 2014. While the original game, I feel, failed to live up to its promise as the spiritual successor to RE4, it was still an intense and unforgiving entry in the survival horror genre that I still find myself thinking about today. The Evil Within 2, however, expands on the first game and improves upon the formula in pretty much every conceivable way. While there are still segments within creepy mansions and tight corridors, these moments are interrupted by long stretches of open-world gameplay. And look, I know what you're thinking, but Seth, open world doesn't fit in the Evil Within franchise at all. I'm here to say, however, that it fits perfectly into the game systems that Tango Gameworks has designed. Sections of corridor shooting and sneaking up behind enemies are mixed in with moments of scavenging and crafting, bringing a bit more of the survival aspect that I feel survival horror games seem to be lacking a bit these days. Mix this in with a more coherent and personal story, polished gunplay, and vastly improved voice acting. Well, for the most part.
Sebastian? What's wrong? Are you all right?
I've got a wonderful family. An amazingly smart and beautiful wife. Why wouldn't I be all right? Come here, Myra.
And you have a sequel that takes what was great about the original and fine-tunes it. There are system performance and pacing issues sprinkled throughout, but The Evil Within 2 is just what gamers need in an era where publishers want to convince us all that linear gameplay is a thing of the past. While Guilty Gear Xrd Rev 2 is technically just an expanded and updated version of Guilty Gear Xrd Revelator from 2015, man, that title is a mouthful. It was a game that I consistently saw myself playing more than anything else during the early summer of last year. In a year that saw the release of what many consider to be one of the absolute best fighting games of all time, Injustice 2, I feel that Rev 2 swept under the radar of most people outside of those within the hardcore fighting game community. Arc System Works, the developer of Guilty Gear Xrd, has been making a name for themselves over the past several years thanks to their series such as Guilty Gear, BlazBlue, and the Persona 4 Arena series. While the story of the Guilty Gear series is a convoluted mess, to say the least, this entry stands as a shining example of what a 2.5D fighting game should be in nearly every other aspect. The animation and art style are gorgeous to look at, presenting some of the most epic and visually stunning finishing moves I have personally ever seen. The gameplay is fast and frantic, and it mostly is based around an insane amount of mobility and move cancels. And while the terminology and mechanics of the game might seem extremely overwhelming at first, Rev 2 presents one of the most expansive and well thought out tutorial systems I have ever seen, making most other fighting games look like no effort hack jobs in comparison. Guilty Gear Xrd Rev 2 sets a new standard for anime style fighting games, and with the recent release and success of Dragon Ball FighterZ, Arc System Works is in the name we're going to stop hearing anytime soon. A few E3 conferences ago, Nintendo said screw it and began hosting their own Nintendo Direct events, where they could release info about their upcoming games without having to adhere to a convention or expo schedule. Their Direct that aired over the summer brought the house down for a multitude of reasons. One of the primary reasons was the confirmation that, after all these years, Metroid Prime 4 was finally in development. Later that day, Nintendo also quietly announced that the first side-scrolling Metroid since 2004's Metroid Zero Mission was coming to the 3DS. Yes, Zero Mission was the last Metroid side-scroller. Other M. What's Other M? Never heard of it. This game, a remake of Metroid 2 Samus Returns on the Game Boy, was also revealed to only be a few months away. As a hardcore Metroid fan, I, of course, officially owned a 3DS about a week later. While I have issues with some of the exploratory aspects of the game, and the mini-bosses become really repetitive after a while, few games can capture the magic of the Metroidvania genre better than the series that started it all. There just doesn't seem to be a game company that understands the genre as well as Nintendo does, and the fascination I had, wondering what was at the bottom of the planet's depths, kept me pushing through no matter how underwhelming certain aspects of the game felt. The just one more area mentality of the Metroid franchise consistently drew me back into the depths of the planet SR-388, and that rewards this game with the distinction of being the one handheld game I actually beat this year. I can only hope that this game sells well, and fans like me get to see more of the 2D Metroid games we love in the future. Yeah, I can already assume this is going to be my most controversial pick on the list so far, and that's specifically because it's not in my top 5. Now, let me be clear right off the bat. Breath of the Wild is an absolutely phenomenal game. There were several parts throughout my journey through Hyrule that left me with a sense of awe that I hadn't felt in years. It made me feel like a kid again. You know, first gliding off of the plateau, fighting one of the dragons, the initial approach to the Zuro domain. All of these moments, among several others, left me with a grin across my face that really only Nintendo is capable of producing. Nintendo's done something admirable here by creating an open world in which it truly feels open. You don't have some invisible hand pushing you towards the next goal. After the plateau, Link is free to explore Hyrule and approach the game's challenges in whatever order and manner he sees fit. You could even theoretically go straight towards the final boss if you want to. It's not recommended, it's near impossible, but you can do it if you want to. However, there are a few negative aspects of the game that mar what is honestly a near perfect experience. There's the weapon durability system that just left me infuriated more often than impressed. There's the obtuse crafting system where it feels like they just tried too hard to be different with how they did crafting. And then there's just the repetitive aesthetic design within the shrines and the Divine Beast dungeons. And from a franchise that has always prided itself on drastically different areas, like the areas within the map are great, but all the dungeons look the same, and it's underwhelming. And Breath of the Wild, it may not be the best Zelda game, but it's easily the most important and game-changing entry that this series has received to this day. And while it doesn't resonate with me as much as it seems to have with the majority of the gaming community, I can still see why it's so important to people. Without further ado, here are my top 5 games of 2017. Let me tell you, I have been severely lacking in 3D Mario games over the past several years. The last non-handheld Nintendo console I owned before I picked up my Switch last year was the N64. And even on that console, I didn't even play Super Mario 64. If I can be honest with you guys, I still haven't. I know. I'm a fake gamer. I haven't played Super Mario 64. What the hell's wrong with me? Anyway, I didn't have a GameCube or a Wii or a Wii U either. So I missed out on Sunshine, Galaxy, Galaxy 2, and Super Mario 3D World. Odyssey was my triumphant return to the whimsical world of our favorite red-hatted plumber, and I couldn't have picked a better jumping back on point. With Odyssey, the new conceit of the gameplay involves using Cappy, Mario's new sentient talking hat. Cappy can take control of a variety of enemies and objects around the environments of each vivid, fully realized world, which provides new ways to explore levels and solve puzzles. There may be over 900 moons to collect throughout the game, but the seemingly endless slew of creative ways to unlock all of them keeps the experience feeling fresh and challenging long after the credits roll. Exploration and experimentation are king in Super Mario Odyssey, and the player is rewarded for nearly every action they take. It might sound boring or perhaps even a bit like overkill, but I can easily state that no game this year made me smile as much as this platforming masterpiece. Before Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, Ninja Theory was known primarily for hack-and-slash games that got the job done, but never necessarily took the industry by storm. Heavenly Sword, Enslaved, Odyssey to the West, and DMC Devil May Cry were all generally well-received games. They were all pretty polarizing and never really broke into the mainstream or gave Ninja Theory that critical acclaim that they were looking for. So after these many unsuccessful attempts to garner this acclaim and success they wanted, Ninja Theory decided that they wanted to try something different. For their next game, they were going to tackle subject matter that they felt games had never really given the proper respect to, and they wanted to do it in a way that had never really done before yet either. In a year clogged with big-budget games pushed by major publishers like Warner Brothers, Electronic Arts, and Activision, Ninja Theory began to build buzz around a game that was completely free of the shackles of corporate oversight bloated budgets, and tacked on downloadable content. Hellblade pushes back against the corporate gaming structure while telling a story that few developers would ever dare tackle. Senua, a Celtic tribeswoman, must journey into the mythical Nordic land of Helheim to bring back her dead beloved, Dillion. Senua's struggles relate to loss, horrible actions of the past, and her own mental illness haunts her throughout her journey, which often manifests itself in numerous unsettling ways, while also continuously blurring the lines between reality and delusion. Senua's Sacrifice uses every aspect of the medium to immerse players into the struggles that Senua, and the mentally ill in general, go through. A major aspect of the game's success can be attributed to some of the best sound design I've ever heard. Like, seriously guys, if you play this game, which you should, you have to play it with surround sound headphones. It is an incomparable experience.
It's breathing. It's breathing. He knows she's getting closer.
He can feel her coming.
And it was thanks to Ninja Theory's extensive research into mental illness that the industry has now received what is possibly its best portrayal of schizophrenia or psychosis. Add in some mostly fantastic gameplay, besides a few repetitive puzzles, and a breakout performance from Alina Jurgens, who would take home a video game award for it, and you have one of the absolute must-play games of 2017. Playing Horizon, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Guerrilla Games had made their name through open-world action games. The company was originally known for the Killzone trilogy of sci-fi first-person shooters, but after Aloy's adventures, it's hard to see Guerrilla ever going back to anything else. With Horizon Zero Dawn, Guerrilla has taken the formula of open-world games that's been finely tuned by the likes of Warner Bros. And Ubisoft over the past decade, and it pushes the subgenre to its absolute peak. Sure, most of the gameplay elements are pretty familiar. I mean, I often describe it as Far Cry meets Tomb Raider meets Monster Hunter meets Metal Gear Solid. Boy, is that a mouthful, I gotta shorten that. But it marries a lot of the concepts perfectly. Like, remember the overdone watchtowers from the likes of Assassin's Creed and Far Cry that you go on to clear up more of the map? Horizon has these, but it makes it more refreshing by making the towers themselves moving puzzles, requiring players to use the environment cleverly rather than looking around for the white-colored ledge to jump or grab onto. This is all brought full circle by a suitably epic, emotional, well-fleshed-out journey and some of the finest third-person combat that's ever been created. Every fight feels like a boss battle, and even when Aloy has become a seemingly unstoppable force, each brawl is decided by split-second actions and the on-the-fly crafting system. The world that Guerrilla has crafted is rich and fully realized, and Aloy has easily become one of my favorite video game characters of the past decade. Horizon was the PlayStation 4 game to own this year, and I'm very intrigued to see where the inevitable sequel goes. Back in March, Horizon Zero Dawn very well was my game of the year, but at the surface, Nier Automata, Nier Automata seems like a niche game made for a very specific audience. Fast-paced combat, an unabashedly Japanese vibe, and a beautiful short-skirt-wearing android as a protagonist. Naturally, a lot of people wrote the game off before it even launched. However, those who dubbed Nier simply a fan service game before playing it at all did themselves a huge disservice, as Nier Automata is one of the most profound, beautiful games not just of 2017, but of all time. Based around an ongoing war between human-designed androids and bubbling, stubby-legged robots, Nier Automata blurs the line of what we define humanity as. And yeah, this is pretty much always the cliché thematic route that stories based on androids take, but Nier tells a wholly unique tale that could only really be portrayed through the medium of video games. One of the common misconceptions about Nier Automata is that you have to play through it several times to get all the story. While this is technically true, each playthrough is unique and has its own tweaks to it. The second playthrough is shown through the perspective of another character, and it provides much more backstory on the enemies and what's really going on. And the third playthrough is a continuation of the story that just happens to be in the same environments. This type of narrative toys with audience conceptions of story in a game, and uses the medium itself to question player choice, identity, memory, and the cost of a soul. This, combined with mixed gameplay segments that bounce between bullet hell and hack and slash, keep things feeling fresh. And this also has one of the most affecting and important video game soundtracks of all time, which creates an experience that is life-changing and wholly exclusive to the mediums of video games. And without further ado, the Rising Action 2017 Game of the Year is... Well, anyone who knows me at all is not slightly surprised by this choice. Did Atlus's long-awaited new entry into the Persona franchise revolutionize gaming in 2017? Not at all. In fact, Persona 5 is a very familiar game. What Persona 5 excels at is taking the formula that fans expect and rolling it around in a big vat of style and aesthetic overkill. Every single inch of this game oozes panache and angst. While the aesthetic choices may seem over the top to some, the comic book-esque visuals coupled with the enters distinguishable games of 2017. Nothing truly looks or feels like Persona 5 besides Persona 5. The main plot of the game is also extremely timely, as it focuses on a group of teenagers pushing back against the status quo, one that consists of the powerful taking advantage of the weak. Your group of Phantom Thieves methodically works their way through more risky targets, forcing these criminals to have a change of heart and one of the more creative narrative conceits in recent memory. This would all crumble if it weren't for the Phantom Thieves themselves, one of the most eclectic and entertaining cast of characters that a Japanese RPG has ever seen. While some characters like Haru and Akechi don't get to shine as much as others, Makoto, Futaba, Sojiro, and Morgana, just to name a few, are all endearing characters that have satisfying arcs. Tying a blood-stained bow on this bundle of rebellion is the best combat system turn-based JRPGs have ever seen. What begins as a simple mix between Final Fantasy and Pokemon becomes so much more as you progress through the game, earning new skills as your relationships with your partners as well as other non-player characters grow, all of this being built upon a dating sim-esque metagame. By the end of the game, the flow of combat is meticulous and exhilarating, allowing players to switch between characters and damage types, allowing for endless chains of attacks that never cease to be entertaining to watch. Persona 5 scratched an itch I've had for years, fulfilling my want for an outstanding JRPG that I hadn't found, seemingly since the PS2 era. There was rarely a moment in my 140 hours with Persona 5, yes, 140 hours, where I felt like turning my console off or putting the controller down, and that is why Persona 5 is the Rising Action Game of 2017. Like I said multiple times throughout the video, this year was absolutely stellar, and I can only hope that 2018 is half as awesome as this year has been. So, if you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up, share it, subscribe to my page if you like my content, because I will hopefully start cranking out more videos of me talking about comic books, video games, movies, pretty much anything I feel like nerding out about. But until then, catchphrase.